let's jump into this lesson for today, which is really more of a discussion, like a master class, only I'm not a master, nor do I consider myself a master. However, I think these three ideas, these three steps will really help in your playing. And the first, really, this is all a matter of the suggestion by Next Step in the bongo, creating your own bongo grooves. I want to take that and talk about making the rhythm your own. So in these three things, this really has to do with being able to make the rhythm your own. So the first step that I think will really help you is to ask yourself this question. This question: do I have this rhythm, this thing that I'm learning? Do I have it memorized? Because if we're going to make a rhythm our own and create new rhythms out of it and create new rhythms, period, we really have to increase our vocabulary, right? It's like increasing a bank account. If you go to a ATM and want to pull money out, you have to have money in the bank account. If you want to have an stimulating intellectual discussion, then whatever language you're speaking in, you need to have a certain command of that language. That means understanding the grammar, understanding vocabulary, having vocabulary, etc., etc. So ask yourself this question: do I have this rhythm memorized, or rudiment, or whatever it is that you're playing? Now, when you ask yourself that question, it's really easy for us to answer it incorrectly or not to be fully truthful or honest with ourselves because, and I don't know if I should say truthful, but the issue is we don't know what we don't know. And so I want to give you a couple of examples of what I mean by memorization, what I'm talking about, the proper memorization so that you can make this rhythm your own. One of the things is, if you're able to play a rhythm and someone walks into the room while you're playing a rhythm to a metronome or a tempo or a recorded song, and they ask you a question, are you able to respond and engage with that question in conversation, even if it's on a basic level? Are you able to respond without being thrown off, to be able to keep the beat, be able to keep the rhythm? Are you able to do that? If not, then you really don't have that rhythm memorized enough for what I'm saying is going to help you, and that is being able to manipulate and control this rhythm, make different rhythms out of it, truly making it your own. So I'm not talking about answering and solving the world's problems in an intellectual debate. But I mean, let's say someone walks in while you're playing a martillo rhythm or double stroke rolls, whatever it is that you're doing, and they ask you if you want a cup of coffee or a bottle of water, you want some water. And you're able to keep that rhythm going and look at them while playing to the recorded music or the tempo of the metronome and say, sure, I would love a glass of water. Thank you so much. And then you keep on going. This is a good indicator that you are at a good place with that rhythm. Because if you're going to play with a band, if you're going to play with other musicians or recorded music, you need to be able to play under a certain amount of pressure. You need to be able to play while other things are going on, when distractions happen. You need to be able to play when other people within the aggregation, within the band, perhaps go off time, when they go off beat. You need to be able to play when they do that. And keep the beat. You need to be able to speed the beat up or slow it down. These things are difficult and sometimes more difficult depending on the context, but this is where you want to be, and it's a good indicator on whether or not you have that rhythm memorized. So ask yourself that question. If you're not where the example that I've given, if you're not there, then great. You now have a problem that you know about. And when you know what the problem is, you can now start working on the solution. And the issue that when you're trying to get better at your percussion, your playing, your music, is you cannot get better if you don't, what was I going to say? The issue of you don't know what you don't know. It's difficult to improve if you don't know what the problem is, right? So if you're able to ask yourself this question and be honest, then you got the issue. The second step is using an effective practice routine. Now that's a huge, almost vague, too broad, too holistic of a topic for me to say as a step. But I wanted to say that to get to this point within that second step. And that is having specific goals versus non-specific. And I'll give an example. if I were to ask you, what is your goal in your playing? And you were to respond with something like, I want to play faster double stroke rolls. Okay, that's great. Great goal. But the issue here is I have that goal. We probably all have that goal if we're drummers. Either we want to play faster or cleaner. Maybe it's not faster. Maybe we want to be able to play it cleaner. But the idea is it's very broad. And when it's too broad, it leaves the potential of not hitting the mark. In marksmanship, sometimes you aim small to hit big, right? You might aim right at the small target so that you can get close within there. If I were to, this is one of the issues of why when people want to lose weight or get in shape, when they just say, yeah, I want to get in shape and lose weight, and then they go and they start working, but they don't have specific goals. So what is a specific goal versus non-specific? Well, one, the example I gave, I want to have faster double stroke rolls on the bongos. Okay, that's great. But let me show you give you an example of a more specific goal that I believe will help you more efficiently, more effectively. I want to have I want to be able to play 16th note double stroke rolls at 120 beats per minute. And I want to be able to do that for a certain amount of time instead of just being able to do it really fast. I want to be able to do it for a minute long, and play those double stroke rolls at that tempo, at that beat, that note duration, 16th notes or whatever. Now we're talking specific. So when we have this specific goal, now we can journal and we have a set of, or a sort of accountability, something that is we can pinpoint and we can work towards. Okay, so now the other issue is if we're setting the goals too far, they may be long-term goals. So there's this other issue that I want to add with this second step of using an effective practice routine. Yes, making specific goals, but in addition, the caveat is setting a deadline, setting a timeline. This is going to help keep us accountable. If we have, for instance, if I'm trying to lose weight, I might say, well, you know what, I'm at a certain weight and I'm at a certain, or I want to be able to, let's say, run a mile. I want to be able to get to run a mile in 8 minutes. Well, first I need to be able to, if I can't run a full mile without stopping, I need to be able to run a mile. So we may start with running 400 meters, 800 meters. But here's the thing. I want to set a goal, a timeline. So I might say, well, I'm not able to run, let's say I'm not able to run a mile today. But I might want to say, in 1 month time, I want to see how far I can run without stopping. So now we have a short-term goal. The long-term goal is running the mile within 8 minutes. The short-term goals are now, I want to, in 30 days, I want to be able to run that mile without stopping. So I'm going to try to run every day or be consistent through the week and run. And then 30 days, I'm going to see where I'm at. So let's bring it back to the percussion. If those double stroke 16th note rolls, 16th note double stroke rolls at 120 beats per minute is my goal, first I need to see where I'm at. Like the mile, can I even play double stroke rolls at a certain tempo evenly? So now I need to test myself. I need to see where I'm at. And that is an integral part of crafting a good routine. If we're not crafting a good routine, then we really don't have accountability. And some people might say, well, a paper, pencil, that's not how I do it when I practice. I just kind of have in my mind what I need to do. Fine. But if you're where you're at and you're trying to get better and you're not there yet, then that's probably part of the problem. And the main issue is a lack of accountability. If you were to record yourself and watch your practice routine, you probably find out that you really don't have a practice routine, or in your practice routine, you're all over the place and unorganized. When you throw darts at a target, if you don't have a target to throw the dart at, period, you're not even going to be anywhere in the vicinity. The dart is just like throwing it in the midst of, throwing it in the air, right? But when we throw the dart, we have a target we're trying to hit. Then within the target, We have certain lines that we're trying to hit within the target and certain number of points that we get for hitting various parts of the target. Same thing. These are target goals. We need a deadline. We need specificity. We need a plan. Right? Take time and write a plan out. Write your goals. What is it that you're trying to do? And then bring them home by bringing it narrower. Don't focus on, oh, I like this rhythm, I like that rhythm, I like this rhythm. Try to find out what it is exactly that you need to work on. Perhaps you have a gig coming up, a virtual performance coming up, a recording coming up. If you don't, make something up. Say, by this particular day, I would like to be able to play a tumbao to this Ray Barretto song. Whatever the case may be. I'm just throwing an example out. But you want to start making these specific goals. Now, I could talk about that in of itself and get really specific as a separate video. But basically, that's the second step, is the idea of making sure that your goals are specific. And so hopefully this helps out. I know some of my ideas are kind of, they in and of themselves, I'm talking about specificity, and they might be a little broad, but non-specific versus specific, okay? Not I just want to play faster versus I want to be able to play note durations at this tempo for this amount of time by this date. Now we're talking. Now we have a goal and a deadline to keep us accountable. Now we need to write down a plan of how we're going to get there. See where you're at. Test yourself. Then start practicing and try to get consistent daily and write down what you were able to do. Then at the end of your practices, videotape, record yourself, and then watch yourself. You will see a lot of things you wouldn't have otherwise. That is one of the biggest things that has helped me along my journey, is also recording myself. So we have, ask yourself, do you really have it memorized? Use an effective practice routine. In other words, specific versus non-specific. And the third and final thing, I know these were a lot of things, but this is just a broad, and we'll go more specific later. But the third thing is, be intentional with these steps, okay? Be intentional, meaning learn yourself. Learn what you often do. When you are, some of us have certain rhythms that we're constantly doing. Sometimes some of us have, I'm not say that, let me back up and say, some of us may be hitting a ceiling. Maybe you're saying, I want to be able to play more rhythms and making it my own. I feel like I'm hitting a ceiling. I'm not able to express myself to a certain level. Well, one of the things we need to know is learning about ourselves. For instance, perhaps you tend to drag behind the beat a lot. That might be what's causing your ability to stay to I was looking for my metronome. It must be on the other side of my studio here. Perhaps it's your ability to stay with the tempo. Perhaps you have a tendency to drag into the next bar, the next measure. If you know that, then you can work on that specifically. So being intentional when it comes to crafting your practice routine and then writing a routine down and really trying to stick to that routine. Now, I'm not saying or suggesting that you should never have a time where you just jam and just play and express yourself and have a good time. That's great. But if we're trying to hit certain goals, then we do have to be intentional. Whether it was back in the day and you were taking your SAT or ACT, maybe that's where you're at now, or taking tests and writing essays in school, you have to be specific. You have to follow a certain format. Without following a format, without having some kind of plan and schedule and being intentional about scheduling it, bringing it down, again, specific, then you really don't have much accountability. And with accountability, it helps keep you on track. And then also you can go back and track where you are. If things aren't working, you can go back, see what you've been doing, and tweak some things. We all have a lot of things going on in our life. There's a lot going on up in this brain. There's a lot of responsibilities and other things we have to do. When we're now trying to just go off of our memory, I'm not talking about memorizing rhythm, but when we just go off of, what do I need to do today? And then just walk in your practice room and then just start practicing. You're going to forget some things that you wanted to work on. You're going to get distracted. You're not going to really know what it is that you're doing. So use this. Use a journal, use a pen, use a pencil, use a computer. Write down make a routine and be intentional about it. Now, does that I'm not saying that everyone has to use an actual journal or pen and paper, but the idea is an intentional specific routine. Now, some may say, well, even when you talk about oral societies, as far as oral, I mean, people that maybe they weren't as literate in their handing rhythms down, and they spoke these things. You may say, well, what about them? Or I don't necessarily just write things down. Fine. But even in those oral societies, it wasn't just a nebulous, unstructured way of practicing and what they were practicing. These were highly sophisticated systems that they were using. Whether it's in West Africa or in Israel, or whether any other part of the world where they have this oral society and tradition and legacy and lineage where they're passing these rhythms down, it's still sophisticated, and there's a system in which they're doing that, whether it's a time of day that they're working on these rhythms or things they're trying to memorize and get better at, or whether it is an amount of time and repetition or whatever particular thing they're working on. There still is a system and a structure and a system. And what I mean also within that system is a way to track the improvement and the progress. So I might be preaching to the choir with many of you, but for some of you, hopefully this will help, or at the very least encourage you to get back to being intentional about crafting a routine and structure so that you can get better and get to where you want to be. Create deadlines. So ask yourself that question: do I really have this rhythm memorized? Because it's about vocabulary. If you want to have a discussion and converse with someone, you have to have a certain command of that language. And you can't just, one of the things that I'll end on this, one of the things that I have made the mistake on in the past is if I had a performance or I needed to give a speech, I would write down my speech or write down my outline of my speech or write an outline of my set. I would go over those songs and that rhythm or whatever needed to be gone over. And if I could play it in a few minutes, then I thought, okay, I have it memorized. But one of the things that I didn't factor in was the stresses, the stress factor, the anxiety factor, all of the distractions and the pressure that comes with being in front of people or doing something with other people. Just the things of life that could cause me to forget the speech, forget the rhythm, and then it doesn't flow. I'm not as comfortable. I'm not as able to express myself because I really didn't have it memorized. When you see incredible musicians that we all admire, one of the things we must remember is that hard work, or mastery rather, camouflages hard work. When someone's able to do something and make it look easy, it's often because there was a lot of repetition and hard work that went in. So I've made that mistake and then get there to the performance or whatever it is, only to find out that I really didn't have that rhythm or that speech as memorized as I thought I did. But then I could actually go back to the practice room and do that thing I worked on, but I didn't factor in the pressures that come with the performance, right? Or if you're in ministry, the ministry. But there still is an aspect of something that you have to perform, something that you have to do. And that's what I'm talking about, the action of doing it, right? So anyways, hopefully I've said a few things that might have helped you. These are things that I'm still working on. I'm also talking and preaching to myself. I've found that these are things that I need to continue to work on. So holiday package, don't forget about the Christmas EP. God bless you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and I'll see you soon.